title of this panel is Peacebuilding in Regional Perspective. And our moderator is a good friend, Dr. Pim Valkenburg, with the Catholic University of America. Please welcome him.
Hey, I've done nothing yet, so. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. Merhaban. I hope that we will have a wonderful session together. As my dear friend Jenna said, the topic for today is going a little bit more into the regional and the concrete perspectives of 3 different nations where the Hizmet movement is working and is facing particular situations, and we want to have a look at that. So the first of our 3 speakers today is Dr. Henalito Sevilla from the University of the Philippines in Diliman. And as you have seen maybe in his biography, he has done a lot of study and he has won a lot of prizes, too much for me to mention. And I would steal his time if I would do so. So that's not a good idea, I guess. So I'll give the floor to Dr. Sevilla.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator and Chair, for that very good introduction about myself. Yes, I did a lot of studies, but this will be my first research on Gulen movement, especially in the Philippine environment. Now, before I would proceed to my presentation, let me express, in behalf of the Filipino delegation, our deep appreciation to the organizers of the International Symposium on Peacebuilding. It is indeed an honor to be part of this august body of scholars and practitioners. My presentation is entitled Turkey's Active Diplomacy in the Philippines as inspired by Fethullah Gulen. I hope I pronounced it correctly. When I said Turkey's active diplomacy, I am not simply referring to the normal official diplomatic engagement between the Philippine embassy and the Turkish embassy, but I am simply referring to the intercultural people-to-people diplomacy. So that throughout my presentation, I will not be touching on how the Turkish embassy or the Philippine embassy are doing well in order for them to strengthen the bilateral relations between the Philippines and Turkey. Now, to give you a brief introduction, from the time we signed our agreement in 1946, based on the a treaty of friendship until the mid-1990s, the Philippine-Turkish relation was considered to be, or thought to be, friendly and problem-free. But one may notice that there was no significant improvement in terms of economic and cultural ties between these 2 countries. However, from mid-1990s, with the establishment of 3 institutions, the Gulen schools in Zamboanga and Manila, plus the Pacific Dialogue Foundation and the Turkish Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, this relationship has improved and new window of opportunity has been established between the Philippines and Turkey. To begin with my presentation, let me first present to you the 3 important questions which would guide us throughout my presentation. One is that, how do the ideas of Fethullah Gulen motivate the movements, the current set of activism between Filipino and Turkish nationals? The second question is, what strategies are employed to promote Turkish interest in the Philippines and the Philippine interest in Turkey? And the last one is, what are the challenges and opportunities these activities encountered from 1995 towards the last month of 2012? Now, to give you a brief introduction of the Philippine-Turkish bilateral relation, from 1949 we signed the Treaty of Friendship, and in 1990 the Turkish government established embassy in Manila, and the following day in 1991, Philippine government established Filipino embassy in the Philippines. However, as I made mention before, there was no significant development of the trade and economic relations between these two countries. From mid-1990 onward, there were 3 institutions established in the Philippines, and these 3 institutions were guided or inspired by the ideas of Fethullah Gulen. Now, basically, there are 5,000 Filipinos in Turkey, and most of them are working as caregivers, and there are only more or less 200 Turkish nationals in the Philippines. And you can imagine how this 200 Turkish national has really contributed a lot to establish or to promote this so-called intercultural cooperation and inter-regional or intra-cultural cooperation. Now, as I made mention, I will not deal so much with the theoretical framework of my study. However, to give you the practical things, the strings of activities that the Turkish national has been conducting in the Philippines, or has been initiating in the country. Now, these are the instruments being created to advance Philippine-Turkish relation. One was the establishment of the ICAD Foundation, by which under the ICAD Foundation, you have the Filipino-Turkish Tolerance Schools in Zamboanga. You have, under the school, we have elementary and high schools. And then we have the Fountain School in Metro Manila. We also have the Turkish Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines and the Pacific Dialogue Foundations in the Philippines. Now, before the 1995, if you can see from this illustration, this is the state of Turkish-Philippine relation, whereby you can only see 2 arrows, the bilateral relation between the Philippines and Turkey. Both countries were U.S. allies. However, both countries were conducting different foreign policy priorities. The Philippines has been engaged more in Arab countries in the Middle East, by which it tries to preserve 3 national interests, such as labor, the protection of Filipino labor, the supply of oil, and the crucial role of the Organization of Islamic Conference, whereas Turkey was focused more on advancing its interests and establishing ties with Western countries such as Europe and America. However, this very different orientation of foreign policy also put us in a limit on how to advance our bilateral relations. Now, to start with, let me quote this sentence or paragraph from Aslan Dugan and Seton in Gulen's Educational Paradigm in Thought and Practice, published in 2007, page 36. It says that a solution to every problem in this life ultimately depends on human beings. Education is the most effective vehicle regarding of whatever we have a paralyzed social and political system, or we have one that operates like clockwise. The first Turkish schools in the Philippines was established in Zamboanga, and Zamboanga is a very beautiful island. However, it is sad to say that this is also an island whereby conflict is always visiting the place. Now, to answer our first question, I borrowed the educational philosophy of Gulen from Robert Hunt and Yüksel Aslan Dogan, The Muslim Citizens of the Globalized World, pages 36-61, regarding education as the only lasting solution for society's problem and needs of humanity. And I will try to apply that on how Turkish educational institutions in the country operate. This is it. The Turkish schools in the Philippines, the schools are non-sectarian and do not follow any religious affiliations. Secular private schools and inspected by the Department of Education of the Republic of the Philippines. It follows scientific, state-prescribed curricula and international recognized program. And just recently, the Turkish school in Manila got accreditation from the Cambridge International School. And this is the characteristics of 2 schools in the Philippines. we have the Filipino-Turkish schools, and we have the Fountain International Schools. And if you notice that in the motto, it is service to humanity is being emphasized. Now, with regards to teachers' profile, Turkish schools in the Philippines would want to maintain this highest standard of education they can deliver to the students. And because of that, they tried to accept some teachers not just from Turkish nationality, but also from the US, from Britain, and China in order to maintain this so-called quality education, as Turkish schools in the Philippines are actually competing with various Filipino schools and international schools proliferating anywhere in the country. And as you can see here, that our graduates in these two schools, 30% of them went to local universities after graduation, 40% went to the University of the Philippines, the premier university in the country, and 30% of them went to the universities abroad. And these are the praises for Turkish schools in the Philippines, which would basically tells us that they really contribute to the promotion of dialogue between Filipinos and Turkish and between different groups in the Philippines. Okay, I am only given 3 minutes. Let's proceed. Now, the next institution is actually the Pacific Dialogue Foundation. It is considered as a cultural actor. Its primary focus is on establishing cultural understanding and has been initiator of the peaceful and productive dialogue between Filipinos of different groups and among Filipino-Turkish friends. So I'll just go on. These are the activities of the Pacific Dialogue Foundation in the Philippines. Interreligious dialogue or interfaith dialogue. And the third one is actually the establishment of the Turkish Chamber of Commerce. As you notice from here, that the Turkish Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines also coordinates with different institutions such as the Pacific Dialogue, ICAD, Philippine Embassy, Turkish Embassy, the Zamboanga School, and other confederation of businessmen and industrialists of Turkey. In short, this is the current state now of the Philippine-Turkish relation. We have the Gulen-inspired schools coordinating with Pacific Dialogue Foundation and the Turkish Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, and then they are coordinating with the Philippine Embassy and Turkish Embassy, and in general, we have seen this strengthening of relation between the two countries. However, there are challenges that these institutions have faced. One is that Turkish schools' operation is limited in 2 areas. Several strife continue to proliferate. Limited businessmen are involved in business matching. There is a need to promote Turkish products in the Philippines. More efforts are needed to encourage parents to send children to war-torn areas to schools. No enough intellectuals in the Philippines that are writing about Gulen and Turkey and schools' competition with other existing schools in the Philippines. However, there are also opportunities. Promotion of education, that is the so-called fusing of various students from different backgrounds in conflict areas, whether you're Christians, Muslims, or whatever, they accepted them with an open arm. And we have also the tendency to promote harmony among students of diverse religious backgrounds. They offer an alternative, non-confrontational solution to peace building in Mindanao, and they strengthen resolve to intercultural dialogue and coexistence, and promote international Turkish language proficiency, increase business opportunity between the two countries, and the last one is the opportunity to introduce Philippines to Turkey and Turkish to the Philippines. Let me conclude my presentation by reading this one. In pursuing the idea of cultural dialogue and unselfish activism in the country, and by being true to the dedication of serving humanity through the promotion of universal values, regardless of skin color, religious and ethnic background, gender and political affiliations, the Turkish nationals in the Philippines, as inspired by the ideas of Gulen, have been able to crucially perform the so-called middle way approach of bridging reasons, faith, religions, and cultural differences together to advance the process of eliminating the so-called ignorance and poverty in the long run. Hence, such has been reinforced by the so-called strategy of political avoidance, meaning to say that they have never sided with any political opposition in the country. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sevilla, for this very enlightenment talk. This idea of the people of the middle way reminded me of a text in the Quran where it is said to the Muslim community, you are the people of the middle way as well. Ummatan wasat, if I remember well. And also it's said to the people of the book. So it's kind of giving us some thought about how we should proceed and steering this middle course. We now go to the middle speaker, which is a good sign, I guess. Dr. Mary Kirk, or even Sister Martha, sorry, excuse me. That's the sister, the other sister, Mary and Martha. Sister Martha Ann Kirk, who is a professor of religious studies at the University of the Incarnate Word in San Antonio in Texas. As you can see in her abstract, she has spent several summers working with generations of women in Iraq, and she will tell us more about that. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you. And thank you for the organizers for setting up such a wonderful opportunity for people of many countries to be together. I'd like to begin inviting you to look at the pictures, and the people that are sitting up here, you might even like turning your chairs around to see the feast of images on the screen. I will begin with the words of a young woman in Iraq who had the opportunity to go to 2 different Hizmet schools there, both in high school and a university. And she said, if one of the graduates of our schools were president of Iraq, this country would be much better. The girls in the room started giggling, but it was wonderful to hear a statement like that. I am using the United Nations 2013 fact sheet about situations in Iraq for women and girls. And according to that fact sheet, 33% of the women in Iraq do not believe that women should be involved in politics at all. According to that fact sheet, 15% of the women in Iraq do not think that women should have the right to vote. So it is extremely significant that young women in the Hizmet schools can dream of themselves as president, and they not only dream, but they're now beginning to be doctors, engineers, fine leaders in that country, which so much needs good leadership. In northern Iraq, between 150 and 180,000 people were killed in the 1980s. Almost all of them were Kurdish, and in very many areas, all of the men of military age were killed, leaving widows, leaving children. Needless to say, there is much trauma when you have seen that much violence around you. So 6 years after these terrible massacres of people in northern Iraq, Turkish educators went there and started the first Turkish school. It was 16 students in a home at that time. Wonderfully, there are now 32 Turkish schools in different parts of Iraq, and my host would only take me to see the Hizmet schools in northern Iraq, in the safe area. But there are 12 of these schools in the southern area of Iraq, in Baghdad, in Basra, in areas where we frequently hear of bombing and violence, and my congratulations to the courage of the Turkish educators who are willing to work in those areas of Iraq. In my 3 summers, not whole summers, but part of the summer in Iraq in 2010, 2011, and 2012, I had the opportunity to interview over 100 people, from high ministers in the Department of Education, to principals, to business people, to teachers, to parents, to students. And I consistently heard about the opportunities that the Hizmet schools were giving to young people. After the first summer, I wanted to really concentrate on women's opportunities for education. So in that second summer, Sister Patricia Madigan in Australia, who works extensively with the Hizmet movement there, and I was so happy to follow the presentation this morning a little bit about the Hizmet movement in Australia. So Sister Patricia Madigan from Australia and I met in Iraq, and we interviewed in 29 families, and we got a substantial amount of information in the families. First of all, I would like to mention that the United Nations fact sheet says twice as many women as men are illiterate in Iraq. It is wonderful to see that the Fetsalar Institution, which is the name of the Turkish group sponsoring the schools, particularly has women's schools for the middle school and the high school age. And that has traditionally been when women would drop out of school or get married. Generally speaking, the grandmothers or the great aunts that we interviewed only had 2 or 3 years of education. Sometimes they were in school until they were 12 years old. Usually, the mothers had a little bit more, but again and again the mothers would say things like, family members say it's a shame for girls to go to school, and we were encouraged to stay home, to help caring for the animals, to help with work on the farm, to help with housework, and to get married very early. The young women that we were interviewing in the Hizmet schools, or who had graduated from the Hizmet schools, had a high level of self-confidence. I want to mention that the UN study says that less than 10% of Iraqi women participate in public organizations. That could be social organizations, that could be labor unions, that could be other types of clubs within Iraq. again and again, the young women in the Hizmet schools would talk about their experience in the science club, the math club, the art club, their experience in the charity club, going out to help the disadvantaged within the city. These young women have a high sense of civic engagement, and it really seems that as they are more integrated in society with their club experience, that they will make a difference in that only 10% of women in Iraq active in the public sphere. I want to mention, and perhaps you can realize that as you see the pictures, that we interviewed Sunni Muslims, Armenian Christians, Shia Muslims, Chaldean Catholic Christians, Mandean, a wide variety of religious groups, and we also interviewed a wide variety of language groups: Turkmen, Kurds, Arabs, Syriani people. And they would often tell us, we didn't associate with the others. We feared or we distrusted the other. And I want you to realize that the Kirkuk area is one of the most valuable places for oil in the whole world. And so there has been great concern. Will the Kurdish people, will the Turkmen people, will the Arab people control this very rich oil land? I could read you many delightful stories of what the women said. One of my favorite was a girl going to Nilüfer School. I have been with her for 3 summers, and she says, "This is a girls' school. Girls can do everything that they want to do." And it's marvelous to see that level of self-confidence. Another young woman who so impressed me saw her Kurdish relatives killed again and again by the Central Arab government. She took me to the prison where her relatives had been tortured, and she said the best thing in her life was when in the Hizmet schools she learned not to hate. She said hatred is a prison. So she is a very good example of the virtues that students learn in Hizmet schools: forgiveness, reconciliation, building unity, being altruistic. The Shared Alliance website talks about Mr. Gulen not only promoting women's education, but encouraging women to be judges and to enter into the political sphere. How wonderful this is to encourage females as well as males to have a positive impact on society. I'd like to close by reading from the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan. There is no tool for development more effective than the empowerment of women. No policy is as likely to raise economic productivity or to reduce infant and maternal mortality. No other policy is as sure to improve nutrition or to influence education for the next generation. And I would also venture to say that no policy is more important in preventing conflict or in achieving reconciliation after a conflict has ended. I want you to know that what I have presented was not actually developed to be a presentation. It was developed as a photography exhibit. I began as an art teacher, and if any of you would like information on having the exhibit of photographs and images of the women, it is available, and I have some flyers that have information on that. Thank you for your wonderful attendance.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martha N. Kirk. I think indeed we've heard it more often today, how important it is to foster hope, and also how important it is to foster courage in those people who do not have the chances, and empower them to get chances. So I think you gave a very good presentation about that. Thank you very much again. We now turn to someone who I'm really delighted to be able to introduce, my good old friend, Alper Alassa from the Netherlands. He's a Dutch Turk or a Turkish Dutchman, however you want to call it. We worked together for a long time. We wrote, in fact, a paper together, but since the organization asked me to moderate this panel, I thought I would better be quiet for the rest, since it's kind of difficult to give a talk and be the moderator at the same time, because who is going to stop you? So I give the floor to Alper Alassa, and he will tell a bit more about the specific situation of the Hizmet movement in the Netherlands under the title Weathering the Storm. Please welcome Alper.
Thank you, Pim. I will tell about the initiatives taken by people from Hizmet movement in Holland, but I will also tell the critics and the question marks people have on Hizmet in Holland as well, and where do they come from, and how we had answered all those critics. I will start with the history and reputation of the Islam in the Netherlands. The Netherlands was very famous of being a very liberal country, especially towards different ideas, religions, and different peoples. This has changed very slowly around the beginning of the new millennium. People started to say that the idea of multiculturalism has come to an end. It had to do with not only 9/11, it was even before that, people found that the contribution of the foreign workers which were increasing all the time in the 90s, was not positive anymore. They put some question marks about the existence of so many foreign workers. All the problems they saw with these foreign workers, they attributed it to eventually to the Islam itself. Some of the politicians started to indicate as a root cause of all the problems they had, or we had, in the society. This resistance they had came from the belief that the basic values of Western society, such as equality, freedom, and the separation between church and state, was not compatible with the Islamic way of life. In 1997, later to be a politician, a very famous politician, Pim Fortuyn. At that time, he was a professor. He has written all these ideas in a book-length pamphlet with the title "Against the Islamization of Our Culture." So he rewrote this in 2001 again. When he was murdered in 2002 by an animal rights activist, people saw this as a sign of that his idea of incompatibility between Islam and Western culture, that it was correct, even though he was murdered by a leftist animal rights activist. But in 2004, Theo van Gogh, who had made a film about the position of women in the Islam, a very negative film, he was murdered by a radical Muslim. So 9/11 and Pim Fortuyn and the murder of Theo van Gogh, those were the three shocking events which convinced a lot of people in Holland that Islam or Muslims, Islam especially, was not compatible with the Western values. And Muslims, instead of integrating, that they were isolating themselves, and the Islam was the reason. So because the majority of the Muslims in Holland are from Turkish origin, and secondly as Moroccan, everything Turks did were looked at with some suspicion after that. So that was kind of a turning point. And this change had far-reaching consequences also for the Hizmet movement. Now about Hizmet movement, it has started in Holland very early, in 1970s. Gulen came to Germany and saw the workers, the Turkish workers, who were then guest workers in Germany and in Holland. And he saw that the workers were acting also accordingly as a guest, which means they weren't organized, they weren't participating, they didn't invest in the education of their children. So most of the children were working instead of going to school. So he called the workers to organize themselves, to invest in education, and to participate in the society. In the late 70s, someone who got inspired by Gulen came from Turkey to Holland, and he started to promote these ideas and calling people to start with educational centers, to organize themselves, etc. So in the 80s, people who listened to him, and people who went to Turkey and listened to the preachers of Mr. Gulen, start to organize themselves. And the first educational centers were opened in the first part of 80s. And it improved from that. They opened dormitories for students, and after that they opened in the first part of 90s. They had already a newspaper, a chamber of commerce, commercial, and in the second part of 90s already dialogue centers, etc. So it was very early. Outside Turkey, that we had in Holland, Hizmet settling itself, improving, and moving forward. Gulen had always called people who visited him, even in the 80s, to be a good citizen, to participate, to have also Dutch citizenship. It was among the Turks a very problematical, a very big problem to apply for the Dutch citizenship. People would see that as a betrayal to your own Turkish nationalism. But he called to take the citizenship and to participate, to be one of the Dutch citizens. So it had a lot of effect on the Turkish people who after that organized themselves better. When in the years 2000, the schools got opened, and after 2007, also parallel to the development, the change towards the Islam and the Muslims, in 2007, when the first school got opened, a lot of criticism came. The right-wing party in the city where the school was opened was the biggest party, which accused, after the school got opened, that the school must have a hidden agenda of segregation and Islamization. In 2000, the municipality had made an investigation and answered this accusation that it wasn't true, that they know these people so long, from the 70s on, so they didn't think that this was correct, this was true. But in 2008, there was a news program which it had shown the same critic through some children telling some of those critics, etc. And also a professor, when asked, is telling that because Gulen people, people from this movement are religious, so they are conservative, and because they are conservative, his conclusion was they cannot be sincere when they are telling that they are active in dialogue, promoting universal values in these schools, etc., etc. So they that people from the movement must have a hidden agenda, was the conclusion. So at that time, some politicians from Kurdish origin had put some questions in the parliament. Those questions were answered with there was no indication that all those organizations are instrumental in radicalizing Muslims, that concerning the identity of the Gulen movement, that it wasn't a monolithic movement, rather it was a network of local organizations with similar ideas. People are religiously conservative, but they are not promoting anything or imposing their ideas on other people. So, but it wasn't ended. A year later, the same questions were asked again in the parliament. It was another minister who said, okay, all the time these questions are coming, so I decided to investigate. And a professor from Bruinesse started a research, and his conclusion was that people of the Gulen movement are socially and morally conservative. They are believers, they are practicing their belief, and they lack, to some degree, a kind of transparency in their organization. But there is a strict separation between privately organized religious activities and public social activities in the movement. People share conservative moral and religious values. However, there is no evidence of indoctrination. So that was the big question of sincerity. Can they be religious at the same time active in the secular arena, organizing dialogue activities or schools, etc., etc.? And this question has been answered by this professor. And the minister, when asked in the parliament about this research, he said, let's not import the political discussions in Turkey to Holland. So he was referring to the questions of the Turkish Kurdish member of the parliament. So what have we learned from these critics and the questions, and what have we done? Firstly, we weren't comfortable with the situation because until 2007 we were organizing so many activities, especially after 9/11, when there was so much anxiety in the society. People were afraid of Muslims, asking to help them. So we went to many organizations, organizing some 200 to 300 activities all over Holland to improve the dialogue, to answer all those questions and anxiety. So we had attributed a lot and contributed a lot to the peace in Holland. So when these critics came and the questions came about the sincerity and the idea of we were doing all this to promote something else, that we have a hidden agenda, we were kind of panicked. So we didn't know how to deal with it, but we went to our friends and they assured us that this is because of the atmosphere in the country after 9/11, that people get suspicious about anything which has to do with Islam. So that we should continue with our work, which we did. But we translated a lot of books to inform people more about the movement, and Gulen organized conferences, also a new website, talking to academicians and journalists. And some of them had, especially those who know Turkey better, helped us to convince the Dutch society about our sincerity and that all those questions are coming from Turkey, actually. The discussion between the Kemalist secularists and the critics they have on the Hizmet movement, they are importing to Holland. So that's was a history of Hizmet in Holland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alper. Even though Alper has been my student in the Netherlands, he still teaches me. So one of the things that I learned from him, and that's, he didn't tell it in the paper, but it is included in the article that we wrote, is that, so the two things that the Hizmet movement did in the Netherlands was giving more transparency and have a clearer presence in the media. And I think that's maybe for those of you who are working in other parts of the world and are encountering similar problems, because I know, having worked in the United States for some time, there are very, very similar suspicions here and how to deal with it. I think that's one of the most important things for the Hizmet movement. But one of the problems involved with that is also that if you do good things, if you perform Hizmet or Himmet, you know there is this verse in the Quran that says, if you do it openly, that is good, but if you do it secretly, that is better. And it's in Surah Al-Baqarah 171, if I remember the verse. And of course, in the New Testament, Jesus says something very similar. So it's one of the problems for religious organizations. Are we doing it openly, as Kim Seok-Mool did yesterday, or are we giving in secret? And if we do so, well, there's the hidden agenda around the corner. So I hope that you have some questions. Yes, I see some questions from our neighbors in Germany coming.
Yes, the neighbors are coming. Allow me one comment on the last contribution and one short question afterwards. As you say, my dear Dutch friend, I'm coming from the German experience, and listening to the contribution, I would describe the situation of Gulen movement as a problem coming from two sides. The first one is, and I believe here the Netherlands and Germany are similar cases, the Turks in the country, the German Turks, are extremely divided. And we can see on a daily basis an import of the inner conflicts of Turkey into the German debate. And unfortunately, there are just a few German journalists who have a knowledge of the interior problems of Turkey. And so the things are transmitted through little groups of persons into the debate. And particularly the Gulen movement is suffering from it. And then a very personal critique. Unfortunately, the journalists are the social group in a country with the longest distance to religion. A modern journalist today, a journalist in the capital, normally is not married or divorced, and is very skeptical about the role of religion, and it is difficult for him to understand that you can have a high motivation coming from belief. And in Germany, to give you the figure, 40% of the population are not bound to a church, and we have the additional problem in East Germany where, because of the Nazi period, which were anti-religion, of course, and the communist period, many people lost the contact to church. And to my great surprise, in Berlin, where I'm from, we have more people in the Protestant part of the country going to the state ceremony still, the communist one, instead of going to confirmation. And now the short question, my dear lady from San Antonio, I'm surprised to hear the figures because my general knowledge of Iraq was that it had the best part of education in the Arab world. So what has happened? Have all these people been pulled out of the country, have left the country, or were the males killed? What has happened so that we see those low levels of education?
I am so glad that you brought up that question. I have frequently been in the Middle East since 1991, and I have known women educated at the University of Baghdad, and that it was one of the best educational centers in the Middle East. There was also a time that UNESCO awarded Iraq for having the highest literacy rate in that country. Sadly, with ongoing violence, the quality of education declined. And then also there is a complexity of high levels of education in Baghdad and parts of the south, and much lower education in the northern region, especially among the Kurds. And so the statistics I was giving you were from the 2013 UN fact sheet on women and women's education in Iraq, and I'm glad that you brought up the complexity.
Okay, thank you very much. I saw two hands, so please, if you proceed to the microphone.
It's a comment to Henalito, and probably one of you can respond. People-to-people diplomacy. And I wondered, how is it possible? How is it possible to be apolitical, political avoidance, and also to be inclusive? That's my dilemma. You tell me that Philippines' biggest ally is United States. And you tell me Turkey's biggest ally, according to the schema, is United States. According to schema. And to be apolitical, to be linked to such a massive political power. If Gulen movement or Hizmet movement is about altruism, is about voluntarism, I salute for that, because that is the genius of the movement. But that genius, that capacity to build capacity in people, which is a social capital this young lady told us about this morning, that investment in the goodness of people, can that be apolitical? It is deeply involved in politics. It is in the heart of the matter. Therefore, I would like, if Hizmet is seeking for avoidance of politics, which I don't think is the case, but if it is the case, it is time that they become competent, that they evolve a competency, a political competency, deeply a political competency to be involved, because that is working for altruism, and that is voluntarism, because it is people-to-people diplomacy. Thank you.
Dr. Sophie.
Thank you very much. To some points, I agree with you. Everything that we do here on Earth, everything that we do every day, has always had this political motivation. If we just define politics by simply referring to pursuing individual interest. And with regards to Turkish schools, their interest is actually to advance education and to provide education to poor communities, poor children in Zamboanga. What I'm trying to see here is that when I see Gulen movement in the Philippines is trying to do political avoidance, I'm trying to say that they try not to side with any other political parties. And what they are trying to pursue is just this balanced approach by which people in the grassroots and not the political groups are actively or should actively participate. Of course, I understand that when you want to promote trade between two countries, you need to have tied up with the political system, the governance, both local and national. But that is not the main objective. That is not the main path where the Gulen movement is trying to pursue. The Gulen movement tries to go first to the grassroots and trying to identify those people, trying to avoid political participation. There was a time where the mayor of Zamboanga tried to ask Gulen School in Zamboanga to participate in a political party, participate in a political demonstration in Zamboanga against someone else. But what did the Gulen movement or the Turkish school in Zamboanga do or did? They said that they would not participate. And the mayor said, after a few weeks, they said, I am so happy that because you did not participate and that you did not take part to our invitation, now it is clear to us that you are non-partisan, and it is clear to us that your vision is just to promote education and not to side with any other political parties.
Okay. Thank you very
The activism is a political, and I think when we say political, it simply depends on how we define the situation on the ground. Yeah.
Okay. I think this topic will probably come back this afternoon again, because like we talked about the flotilla incident, there are some instances where we need to think about how best to deal with being partisan, being non-partisan, being political, being apolitical. So I think this question will come back. For now, the word is to the lady, if she is ready for her question. Are you? Yeah.
Good morning, thank you. I have 3 connected questions. I've heard the word dialogue used a great deal, and I know it's a tool, as it were, of the movement, and it's one I use a lot. So I'm really curious to have it defined. I don't know what exactly is meant by dialogue. And secondly, I'd like very much to know exactly how a dialogue is conducted among, say, 20 people and of different kinds, at all kinds of ways different. And thirdly, how concretely and specifically in a dialogue situation does any one of your, particularly each of you, local movements with the same ideas, and that applies to all of my questions, deal with difference when people express painful feelings of hurt or hatred, it may not use the word, but it's in most of us, or any major difficult emotional talk that is emotionally involved. Thank you.
Opera, do you want to begin?
Now, in Holland, when we organize dialogue, we mean by dialogue to bring people together and give them the opportunity to tell about themselves, but also to listen to what the other people have to say. But the dialogue, as we see, has different levels. You start with getting to know each other, so you can ask any question and listen the answers, and also answer your own questions. But it is only the start, and eventually dialogue has to move forward from getting to know each other to diapraxis. It must have in the horizon an idea of we are living together. So we have to cooperate, we have to find a basis to do that. So as we, because this is our idea of dialogue, we organize in Holland very different activities, from grassroots activities by which we bring people together. For example, very simple activities, bringing women together and cooking. So they cook and tell about their culture. So it seems simple, but after such an activity, because they can ask any question, because they meet the other in this way, in a very comfortable, not stressful way. They appreciate each other, and they find also something to do for other people in their surroundings. So you can move very quickly from that understanding and meeting towards doing something for elderly in the neighborhood, for example. It's a very small example. I don't know, I can tell more, but I think they have also...
We would like to share from the 3 speakers
Yes.
a little bit. Yeah. Dr. Kirk.
I'd like to give you a very specific resource to use. I don't know if any of you want to write this down. If you will do a web search for In the Footprints of Francis and the Sultan. there is a video now available, and online there is a study guide to go with the video. And it is an excellent booklet on Muslim-Christian dialogue. And it gives very clear principles for developing dialogue in groups, listening, being able to repeat what the other has said, being respectful towards different points of view. I'd like to commend the Institute of Interfaith Dialogue, which is now called the Dialogue Institute of the Southwest. They worked with the Catholic bishops and the Franciscans and produced this very fine video of a wonderful story that while Christian crusaders and Muslims were killing each other, St. Francis of Assisi entered into respectful dialogue with the Muslim Sultan of Egypt. And this video invites people today to participate in listening and serious dialogue with each other. I very happily want to say that in San Antonio, Texas, we had over 500 Muslims and Christians together on a Friday evening watching that video, spending part of the time in a church, part of the time in a mosque, and it was an exceptionally fine program, and everyone is saying, let's do it again with more of that wonderful Turkish food.
All right. Finally, Dr. Sevilla.
Yeah, just let me share my idea about dialogue. In this world where complexity defines our world, every one of us has different definition. Sometimes it depends on what cultural background we came from. There is no, for me, absolute definition of what dialogue is. For me, dialogue is simply an identification of commonalities and differences of the issue, and it can simply be expressed through negotiation, talks, and it can also be expressed through actions.
We have about 30 seconds left. I happen to be a professor of interreligious dialogue, so I will now give you a lecture for 45 minutes. No, I won't. But I will give you my 2 cents. I once had the opportunity to be with a number of people, big number of people who were involved in interreligious dialogue, which of course is a specific, very specific form of dialogue. And they were asked, what for you is real dialogue? Because I think that most of us would immediately agree to say that what goes under the name of dialogue is very often niceties. We discussed that earlier this morning as well. Only every now and then something real happens. And what these people described to me was the moment that you have no answer, the moment that you start thinking, I need to rethink my frame of reference because I have no answer to what is happening now. That's the moment when real dialogue can happen. And that in fact means that you do learn from differences more than from the feeling we are all in this together, even though that is very important as well. Okay, I only had 30 seconds, so I'll stop here. Please, I would ask you to be seated for a few moments because Ms. Jenna Lutke will now give some announcement if she will come to the podium. And I'll just bridge the 20 seconds that she needs to get here by, I hope you will share me in thanking our 3 panelists this morning.